Coming up on this episode of Belief Hole.
It starts with just a trickle, but over time the river swells and rips open the earth to divulge dark, forbidden treasures. What spirits lay in wait to guard the sacred bounty of lost bones? What's it like to see beyond the veil? From highway spooklight standoffs and weather-wielding house ghosts to unexplained footsteps and clandestine rendezvous with otherworldly craft, we unearth these strange but true stories of the inexplicable and the unknown.
Conspiracy,
synchronicity,
Sasquatch,
Homunculus,
alien races,
Satanism in Hollywood,
MK Ultra,
Tartaria.
There's like a whole, I've been watching this one guy that,
Close the door, Id.
Jury, close your door!
what's the,
Inner Earth disagreements.
Ghost Dad?
I like that movie.
Dogman,
Bohemian Grove.
Corey Feldman.
Magicians are demons.
Specters and
Spirits,
sleep
sleep
paralysis,
paralysis.
strange disappearances,
Sky whale phenomenon.
alternative history, shadow people,
Quiet, I'm trying to say words with the mouth.
it's getting dicey out there, poltergeists,
That's cool.
Anunnaki,
What is the moon?
Elf towers.
I would never talk about it. That's old.
Y2K.
cover-ups, apocalyptic catastrophe, vampire.
I know, right? That was so weird. Oh, hey, guys.
Oh, hey, funny you catching us here.
Mid-conversation. So natural. Well, hello.
Hello, Jeremy. I'm John.
And I was Jeremy. And I'm Chris. Welcome to Belief Hole. Yes, welcome to another exceptional episode of strange true stories from listeners. Absolutely. This is a special one.
Got some good stories today.
Yeah, Strange Stories 10. These, I think, are my favorite. I love the research episodes, but these are nice because we get to listen to what our listeners are experiencing out there in the world. Yeah, people that we know. There's plenty of strangeness to go around. Yeah, it's great to hear some crazy stories online or read them in books, which we do a lot of both of those. But to get them from people that listen to the show that we can actually talk to, have personal experiences, makes it a little more real. Yeah, we got some really interesting stories on this episode. Like what, Chris? Well, we've got everything from haunted woodland skulls to backroad UFO standoffs. Did you hear about this one? It's
No.
going to be good. Yeah. Weather-bending house ghosts. I'm excited for that one. My brain's working that out.
Harp?
Yes. It's a HARP ghost. It's a ghost of a scientist who worked at HARP. And he arrived in someone's home in New Jersey. He still has access to the tech. No, not quite that. It's more of a supernatural ability to control the weather.
Like psychic cloud seeding?
Ooh, I like that. And there's a bunch of other stuff we're going to get into today. Really great stories. The longer we do the show, the harder it is to select stories for these episodes because really, truly, like going back and going through the archive, there's so many I want to do, but I know we only have so much time per episode to do these.
They keep getting better.
They keep getting better, and there are people that have sent in stories months ago. There's a lot of interesting stories out there. We are trying hard to get to all of them, but what's great is even stories that we're presenting today, if we get a lot of supplementary information that's really interesting anecdotes about the areas and things that come along with these stories from listeners, personal accounts, so we don't have time to fit all the details, and we have now listener posts or pages for each story we present that has additional information, some cool images, and even stories that we don't get to. They will eventually all live in our listener stories archive. Strange Listener Stories archive. So you guys can check those out. Makes it easy to share the stories. If there's any details we didn't get to, you can go there and you can read them and get more tickly in your scary bones.
More tickly?
I don't know. Words. I'm working with my words, okay? I like that. You would creepy, Chris. Speaking of creepy, let's get into it. Yeah, I like it. Righteous. I love this time of year, this August end here. This is the ending of August.
I think it's horrible time.
Well, it's a little
of year.
warm.
It's disgusting
honestly.
out right now.
That was quite a pushback on Chris's statement.
Well, I mean, I like because
it's a horrible time.
I just mean the weather has been really, really humid and gross.
Ohio's known for its excellent weather all year long.
I know a couple weeks before it was 70 and rainy, and now it's like 95 and humid.
You get a couple beautiful days in between. This is a very fascinating conversation. But what I was trying to say was, aside from the weather, I love this time of year because I don't know about you guys, but I can almost sense that fall is coming. Like there's something about this time of year.
The end of summer.
Yeah. The veil is, it's getting weak at the
I
bottom.
like fall, but I don't like what comes after fall.
winter. Well, we're not talking about that, John. We're trying to focus on the spooky stuff. Fall is pregnant with Halloween.
I do like fall.
That's what's so great about it. On today's episode of Weather, he's setting up the feeling. I get it. I like it. On the way here through Rogues Hollow, I already started to feel the ghouls coming out of the shadows. That's all I was trying to say.
Well, Rogues Hollow always has ghouls and shadows.
That's true, but they're more brave around this time of year. Anyway, yes, let's get our first story going, John. And you want to set this one up? You know this story well. You gathered this one. I'm excited.
Our first story we have from a listener named Jeff who sent in a really awesome story. Happened last year up in Cuyahoga Valley.
Kind of disturbing story, right?
Yes, it's definitely a really unique story.
This is close to us, by the way.
He lives up there, and there's a very powerful river that resides behind, like he could see it out of his window.
Is it the Cuyahoga? It's in the Cuyahoga Valley.
Cuyahoga Valley. I think it's the Cuyahoga River. All right.
So I recently moved up to the Cuyahoga Valley in Northeast Ohio, and I found a place to rent because of the river. I really wanted to explore it and see what I could find down there. I knew there was wild animals and different seashells from millions of years ago, the way the river can rip open fresh land. So I ventured down there for a couple months, finding really neat little crystallized stones and all this other cool stuff. And that was my main goal, was to just find a collection of unique objects. Well, I decided to jump in the river a different way this time. Plunged in, got across it. It's a good 15 to 20 feet across, big deep holes of water. It's always shifting and moving, the landscape. And as I'm walking up through the rock bed, I find, of all things, a human skull.
What?
And inside the skull was a relief of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. And the skull itself and the Da Vinci had the same patina, which really caught me. It was a bronzed and gold patina. It looked like it's been just unearthed within the last month or so. Who knows? But the way this river can rip open new land, you'd have to think it has not been there for long.
Bizarre. Yeah.
Well, it obviously took me by surprise. I couldn't get it off my mind. I decided to just leave it there and keep walking on because it was just early in the day.
I'll get that skull later.
And I was venturing downriver, finding little bits of this and a little bit of that, but at the same time, I couldn't get the skull out of my head. And a couple hours go by, and I found my way back to the skull. And right away, I picked up the Da Vinci piece. It was actually hooked into the eye socket.
That's crazy.
Pulled it out.
Oh, what?
Really was studying it. It was just amazing piece. My adrenaline was through the roof. And I was really going back and forth on whether or not I wanted to take this human skull. The whole point of being down there was to find cool stuff and add it to my collection of whether it's, I don't know, feathers or stones, whatever I find. So anyway, I decided to pick this skull up, at least to examine it. Pick it up, I'm looking at it, turn it over. I said, okay, I think he's gonna come with me for a little bit.
It's a brave man.
So I put it in my bag. And right away, I could sense the atmosphere changing in a way. I jumped into the river, started swimming across, and I could just feel the excitement, whether it was because I just found the find of the year or was it something else. And all of a sudden, there was a heavy presence above my head where I could definitely feel like there was something looking at me. So I snapped my head up, and there was a blue orb, maybe 150, 200 feet above my head.
Weird.
And it was right over top of me, and it was definitely letting itself know that it was watching me in a sense. It demanded to be seen. It was not translucent. It was definitely had almost like a white, milky core.
Weird.
And it was
weird, yeah.
illuminating blue with vibrations coming off of it, and it seemed big to me for being high up in the sky as it was. Knowing my surroundings, the riverbed is lined with sycamore trees, and they grow 60 to 70 feet. And I know it was above the sycamore trees, but it wasn't higher than the top of the valley.
Interesting.
But it's hard to get a full idea how far it was, but it was definitely there for me. And I couldn't help but think it was connected to the skull and what I found that day. And as I was walking away in a rather fast form, because At this point, I didn't know if it was just watching me or if it was protecting this artifact that I found. And I didn't feel too threatened, so I decided to keep walking as I was watching the orb. And it just slowly started ascending, and then it started moving north up the Cuyahoga River as I was watching it, and it flashed and disappeared before my eyes. And it's been with me. It's been a strong presence. You don't hardly forget something like that.
Creepy.
That'd be
dude.
such a disturbing feeling, dude.
I mean,
So many odd
I
aspects
know.
to that story. Well, first that he found a human skull.
yeah, that definitely is how it starts the whole story. But
Yeah.
obviously, the more compelling part is the orb that was connected
Well,
to the
that's-
skull.
yeah, I mean,
so
that's-
he said that he spent a lot of time down there, like looking for stuff. That was kind of
Right.
one of his hobbies.
Awesome hobby, by the way.
Yeah, super cool.
It's just a great way to spend time outside.
Here's a seashell, here's a coin, oh, here's a skull with a painting in it. I'll take it home.
well, kind of what's interesting, I did get a chance to talk to him, and he said that, first of all, that wasn't the only body that he saw down there.
Really?
What? In the
Yeah.
Cuyahoga Valley.
Yes. And
Guess where I'm not hiking anymore.
well, this is kind of his theory on why it's happening, because he was in the river a lot looking for
right.
stuff.
Mhm.
But the way he talked about how aggressive the river is and how it can just churn up stuff.
Rip open new land. I
He's
like that.
thinking that it was potentially from the Civil War or
Right.
even a cemetery that got washed away at some point.
Yeah.
I want to know this Da Vinci. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
very important detail in there. So the Last Supper, it was in the skull. So
It wasn't connected.
okay. It sounded like it was a
was
painting
in-
done and put
Yes.
in the skull.
It wasn't put in the skull. He doesn't think. He's not 100% sure, but it wasn't like connected to it. It was in the eye socket.
Right.
But it wasn't
Like it
like
washed up into it,
Yeah, it was
maybe?
like washed into it, which
But-
is even weirder.
But it must have, yeah, I see what you're saying, like that kind of spiritual connection to the
Right.
skull.
And then the orb.
The weird thing, though, that he mentioned when they were dredged up, maybe they were dredged up at the same time, but the fact that it had the same patina.
Right.
So the same aging on it.
That's true.
I think that the answer here is obvious, and I can't believe that we haven't just thought about it already.
Cattle mutilations?
No, river pirates, duh.
River pirates.
Transporting contraband and expensive ancient artifacts, valuable ancient artifacts through the Cuyahoga Valley were attacked by marauding Native Americans as someone died, and then
Christian river pilots who would be carrying pictures of the Last Supper.
probably missionaries.
Yeah, that makes sense. Missionary pirates.
No, but very bizarre story.
Yeah.
Makes me want to go back. You know, John, this is the place where we do our brotherly river walk, the three of us every year.
We do?
Cuyahoga Valley, this is that same river.
When do we do brotherly river walks?
What are you talking about? We did it at least 2 years in a
Oh.
row.
That's not the...
technically the Cuyahoga Valley.
It's the same river.
Is it really?
Mhm.
Because that's not a very intense river.
Well, technically, I think it's in the Cuyahoga Valley, but it's not the Cuyahoga River there.
Yeah, no, this is like a powerful
Yeah, but
river.
the reason I was thinking of that was because when we do those walks, I'm always fascinated by these layers, right? As
Yeah.
you're walking through there, these layers of sandstone or whatever it is.
Near the waterfall.
Right, where you can just see the thousands of years.
Different rock layers.
But just looking at that, and you're like, oh man,
Like I could see bones sticking out of there. Yeah, I mean, and that, like you mentioned, John, the most interesting aspect obviously is the orb connected to it. The fact that I love the image of it being, first of all, following him once he picks it up. It's
yeah,
like
it's so strange,
this,
dude.
either like you said, like a protective kind of force being, or I mean, you don't want to think it's the former inhabitor of the
He
soul.
said
of the
he
skull.
didn't think that that's what
Okay,
it
it was
felt
something
like.
else watching.
Yeah. He felt like it was definitely connected to him picking up that artifact, which
Right.
makes obvious sense.
It
I
could have
mean,
been something. I mean, you think of forest, you think of like fairies in the sense of hidden entities that maybe are curious and maybe are protective of sacred things in the forest, whether it's someone who passed away, their remains or whatever. It's a Raiders of the Lost Ark type deal. You're taking something sacred and
whatever
and
that,
special.
that freaking Da Vinci painting.
Yeah, that is weird too.
I mean, that's an interesting idea, but I think the obvious thing that jumps out is like, yeah,
River pirates?
dead person's skull, then a blue orb. Blue orbs are associated with spirits. Dead person's spirit.
Right.
I mean, that's the
That's what
obvious
I would-
connection.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
I also asked him, so you sure it wasn't like technology?
Oh,
You know,
like a
I thought
drone
it
or
might have been
something?
a UFO or something. Like he said it did not feel like that. It felt like energy.
It was technically in the valley, like 200 feet up, but still inside the valley. Like that's kind of interesting because that to me says this was inside. It was watching from a close location, not way up in the sky, just happened to be floating. It seems more present. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That makes
Well,
sense.
if it was technology, if it was the 200 to 300 feet, it definitely wasn't an aircraft. I don't think there's an airport.
Well, I didn't even mean like drone or something. I meant like a hyper advanced craft.
Oh, right.
I mean, the way you described it, it kind of reminded me a little bit of my UFO sighting, how it had like the pulsing lights.
Right, like the lava look inside,
Yeah.
except white instead
And he
of...
did say it had like kind of a pulsing feel to it, but it wasn't like there was anything solid there. It was like
Yeah.
light. It was like translucent.
We should find out if we can get a kind of a close specific location. I'd like to go up to this area.
Well, I know where it is.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Mhm. He said the area is just really a magical place.
Yeah. We're not far from
You
there.
want to know what's really strange, John? I don't think I've told you this. Super synchronistically, maybe I did tell you. About a week ago, I found a piece of a skull in a river.
What?
Did I tell you that?
No.
Isn't this bizarre?
This is in the creek in Doylestown.
Yeah, so in Doylestown, Rogues Hollow, there's a creek that runs through Silver Creek.
I remember you mentioning this.
Yeah, and I think it's, so I'm not sure if it's the Silver Creek, but there was silver mining in the hollow down here. And I was walking there the other day, beautiful area, and this piece that I thought was like pottery or something was just kind of under the water but out of the rocks. And so I grabbed it, and as I was polishing it off, it was so ridiculously smooth, like it had been there for a long, long time. And at first I was like, oh, this is a piece of like pottery, and it had like browns and blacks, like almost like it had been charred or burned. And as I was cleaning it and looking at it, it had like this kind of, that seam when two pieces of skull plate come together around the ocular eye socket, there's like this kind of seam. And that's what it had. And then I was like, this looks just like bone. And it just looked like an eye socket to me. But if it is an eye socket, it belongs to a giant because it's very large.
Or mammoth.
Or a mammoth.
I'm a moth.
I'm a month.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, but I did one of these things where when I was taking it, I was like, okay, I'm hoping it's from a mammoth, maybe a giant. I don't think it belongs to like a regular
Maybe a
human.
giant.
And I out loud said, if anything is here that's protecting this thing, or permission from the previous owner of the skull, I'm taking this out of like respect and curiosity. Maybe you want to be in the river, maybe you don't. I hope the rest of your body's not here, but maybe I'll come back. But I was careful about that,
Right.
and sincere about it.
Should
and,
take it to somebody.
just like Jeff. When
Yeah.
he took it and was like,
But he was so like, because that's what he was doing down. It was like finding the cool shit. That
Yeah,
was
absolutely.
part of the reason why he took it.
Yeah.
Is because he's down there to find cool shit. Like
Right.
if you had just been a random person, you probably would have never picked it up to begin with.
Yeah.
You'd probably call the police, like most people.
right.
But
Jeff's a special guy.
well, he wanted the coolest shit.
Yeah.
So he's like, how can I leave a skull with a
That's
picture
true.
of the Last Supper in there? Like I'd never forgive myself.
If you are purely
Yeah.
at your heart a treasure hunter of odd things,
it's like that's the mother. That's the holy grail
Yeah.
of treasure.
So what was the ending though?
does he still have this orb attached skull?
He put that back.
Okay, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I'm not a brave enough
Well,
man.
I would want to put it back too after I had an orb follow me.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, bad juju.
But the whole thing is just such a crazy story.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's some sort of tradition somewhere to like put artwork in skull. Like I know he said it seemed like it just happenstance arrived in the
Dude.
socket of the eye, but what if there is, because you always think about like,
Dude, sorry to cut you off, but this could be part of a barrel because when I buried my chinchilla,
Yeah, it definitely could.
I buried
didn't
it.
think about this.
I buried Chelsea, my chinchilla.
Okay, do we really have to bring this up?
Yeah, because it's a specific connection. In an ice cream bucket, I buried her with a picture of Jesus. And on the back of
That's
it,
right.
I was small. On the back of it was a map to get back to the house in case she came back. And she did come back because I buried her in a creek bed. And in the spring, she rose back to the surface.
on Easter.
She didn't actually come out of the ice
Okay,
cream
we
thing,
get it.
though. Yeah, she was.
But
pretty
yeah,
good.
I think that's a very real possibility that
It was
that
some sort of blessing,
burial
prayer.
part of the, especially since it's the same color.
That's crazy to
But
think
it's
about.
weird that it's got stuck in the.
Yeah.
It makes sense though, because at first I was thinking it might have been like a necklace or something. That's what I initially imagined, but it was just stuck in the eye socket.
Yeah.
So it could have just been part of a burial, got washed up, and
Well,
it still doesn't explain the orb.
no, it does not. Well, terrific story, Jeff.
Yeah. Thank you for submitting that.
I hope that it has not followed you home. And if you find anything else crazy out there and have more experiences, definitely let us know. But yeah, that's fascinating.
We should go out there sometime.
Yeah, I hope that spirit, if it was a spirit, is resting now.
He was tired.
Following Jeff around.
Okay, let's go to the next story.
Yes, what do we have next year, Chris?
All right. Well, we're going to totally mix it up here with the next account. This came from a listener of the show, Tracy, and I was excited when he reached out. And it wasn't to share a story initially. It was just to say, great job, really enjoying the episodes, especially the recent UFO disclosure stuff. He actually spent time on the USS Nimitz in the 90s.
Oh, that's right.
And if that doesn't sound familiar to you, then you've been living under a rock, because the USS Nimitz is the recently infamous Navy ship that David Fravor and other people who had witnessed this Tic Tac shaped UFO in 2004 had been stationed.
We've talked about that before. We covered that, right?
Yeah, we did a big breakdown this season and last season. We touched on it when it first kind of broke. So when he reached out to say, he was really enjoying the show, I was like, hey, have you had any strange experiences out there? Like, I don't want to push for any stories, and he came back with like, well, I have a short story. This is a pretty fascinating account here. And I think the recent folklore of the Nimitz itself, I think it adds a little credence to his account.
Oh yeah, definitely. So this comes from Tracy while aboard the USS Nimitz. I was stationed on the USS Nimitz from 1994 to 1997. The ship was doing workups for the preparation to do a world cruise from Bremerton to Virginia. We spent a lot of time off the coast of San Diego, and the only real time you would have to yourself was at night. I would go to the fantail or the very back of the ship at night and enjoy the California evenings. We would always have one other ship behind us for safety reasons, but it was always very dark, and the noise from the water was calming. This particular night, I was out roughly midnight or later with a friend. We were just chilling after a long day. Our ship began to slow to a crawl, barely moving, which wasn't too uncommon, and we didn't think much of it. It was a normal California night, overcast, cloudy, and with both ships at crawl, my friend and I suddenly noticed a huge round ship or aircraft hovering at the cloud line. It made no noise, and it just stayed in one spot for a good 10 minutes. It was very large and round, and you certainly could make out multiple lights. It kind of reminded me of Independence Day, when the large ship comes to Earth. Not like the pyramids, it was very close and made absolutely no noise. Of course, it being dark and overcast, you couldn't make out any marking or clarification of what it was. Typical story, of course. After what seemed a long period of time, the craft again, without making a noise, lifted up into the clouds and was gone. Shortly after, our 2 Navy vessels fired up, and off we went. It was very cool. I bet it was. The next day, we told our story to some of our coworkers, and they figured it was a tall tale. I would have thought the same, but I was there. Most likely some military aircraft, but a creepy, cool night.
That's an eerie visual to me. And by the way, this is off the coast of San Diego, and the Nimitz encounter with the Tic Tac UFO, it was 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. Same area,
right in the same area.
Same ship.
So this could be part of an underground, maybe a submerged civilization advanced, or maybe you want to say
UFO base?
A UFO base, because you hear that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stories of coming in and out of the water.
Right.
Interesting timing, too, that the ships, just as they slow to a crawl, they notice this thing, the thing leaves, and the ship fires back up. Maybe it was a clandestine meeting. Maybe the higher-ups in the ship were like, oh, we're going to meet General Zhao from Submerged Spaceship 5 at this time.
From the Valerian civilization.
Yeah, we'll go out in our invisible meetup buoy.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing. The idea that his ship and then the other ship that they were with slowed to a crawl, and then suddenly he's walking out back and then notices the ship in the cloud line, this giant circular craft with these lights, and they're just staring at this. It's there for 10 minutes, and then as soon as it like lifts off, and I'm just imagining like the clouds kind of like lifting up with the suction of this thing as it silently drifts into the sky, and then right after it moves away, their ships start up again. And there's no notice of why the ship slowed or why they started again. It was just something that was kind of unusual, but it occurred at the same time that this thing appeared, and then right after it left, just made me wonder what you're saying, Jared, like, was this some sort of operation or some sort of meeting, or, I mean, who knows, but it's really interesting. Or maybe just something that they wanted to kind of quietly observe when they noticed it in the area through radar or something.
Yeah, very interesting. Great story, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Great connection with the Tic Tac, which is now a famous part of UFO lore and legend.
Absolutely.
Let's take a quick break.
All right, we'll be back.
On this week's expansion episode, we'll encounter the uneasy sensation caused by an open attic door in an otherwise empty home. Most of you have experienced the hair-raising feeling that accompanies the suspicion that you may not be alone in your house when you are certain you should be. Your home is usually the safest and most comfortable place you know, which is what makes it so disturbing when you realize something is watching you from the crack of your bedroom door.
By that, but with the distraction, everything going on, trying to figure out getting the plumbing fixed and all that stuff, she doesn't really focus on that too much. Then, this is about 6 months into having this place. She's been working every day, working all these jobs, rarely home. After this puppy incident, she gets sick and has to stay home from work. First time since she's been living there. She's home all day. 7 o'clock, she's watching her stories, and she hears some kind of thumps coming from the bedroom. She's out in the living room, watching her shows, and she's thinking, well, I have cats, they're jumping around. You hear noises, not thinking too much about it. 11 o'clock rolls around, getting ready for bed, turns off lights, decided to take a bath, candle lit, so it's real dark, real romantic. She gets in her bathtub, and from her bathtub, she can see the hatch to the attic. It's open. Uh-oh. Hatch to the attic is open.
Did the dog open it?
Great question. Probably not.
It did get in the sink by itself.
Okay. Anyway, so when she sees the hatch open above her, she said everything slows down.
Yeah.
She realizes someone is in the house, and then she starts putting
the sound, and it goes boom. Yeah.
I just assumed you'd put that in after.
If you enjoyed that clip, head over to beliefhole.com and hit the expansion button to get access to all of our extra episodes. We're back.
Welcome back for more creepy stories. Cue lightning strike.
Writing on the wall.
Writing on the wall.
I just read that from an email.
Wow, good input. While you were talking, I was reading my email, and this is what I had read. Very applicable.
I thought I kind of went with it. You see the writing on the
wall. It sounded creepy when you said it. I was like, oh, is that a listener story? You're like, no, it's my email.
Well, it was a creepy listener story email.
Oh, was it really? Nice. Silently winks. Okay, well, what do we got, Chris? Okay, this next story is pretty fascinating. The concept of being a magnet for spirit or for entities, right? Or for just strange occurrences in general. We get quite a number of submissions of people that seem to have ongoing situations. This is an interesting one from James Day. I call this a menagerie of lingering companions. I'll preface my story with this. I have things attached to me. One unknown, all are shadowy figures unless otherwise stated, and they are as follows. A large, yellow-eyed frog. Ooh. A hulking man-shaped figure. A Courage the Cowardly Dog type cat. Triangle face included. So that's, for those who don't know, it's a cartoon from the early 2000s, late 90s.
Oh yeah, the Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, so there's a cat entity in there that has a sort of triangular face. Almost looks a little demonic in a way.
But is it he doesn't see a cartoon.
He's just describing, I think, the shape of it.
Similar to that. Yeah. Not drawn.
Maybe a cartoon, I don't know.
Probably not, but still creepy.
A shadow ball that lurks in corners where I sleep. A little boy who's a good guy. And an old woman.
Ugh, never liked the old woman.
Definitely a collection of unique entities there.
Yeah, interesting. You hear this as a kind of a familiar theme too. Some people just seem to be magnets, and sometimes you really get a sense that they have experienced something throughout their life, which I think is definitely possible.
Well, there's some people that write to us, they have these ongoing things with different spirits.
Or entities, not even necessarily spirits.
Right.
We don't know what these are.
It could be interdimensional feeders, who knows? I think especially when you have the more bizarre things like a yellow-eyed frog.
Yeah.
These things have been with me for most of my life. The little boy and old woman being the only two I have an idea of where I picked them up. This is a story of black-eyed children and an entity I fondly and fearfully refer to as house ghost. It was a random night. We were having a small get-together and playing with Ghost Radar Classic. By the way, this is an app you can download, which I did last night briefly until it indicated there were two entities at either window at 2:30 in the morning when I was researching, and so I immediately turned it off.
Yeah, thanks for using my phone for that.
So what does it just scan where they are?
Yeah, allegedly uses technology within the phone to sort of read signals of vibration. Of course, there's some insane claims, and when I read what it features in there, like reading the spectral plane or something, or reading the quantum flux little For $2.99 or free with advertisements, you can read the quantum flux around you to see what entities exist. Yeah, interesting. Some of these apps, I think, get lucky with some of that there are things that could actually be picked up, but a lot of it is also, seems like a stretch. But yeah, which one?
We did like an EVP episode.
Oh, yeah.
Not EVP. It was something along those lines. And
An early ghost tech. We tested it.
And it was like saying like brothers believe.
Oh, I forgot about that, dude.
Laughter.
Yeah. Dude, maybe we could drop that clip if we...
Oh, dude, that was creepy. And then that was right around that time that I had the ghost interaction in my house where it was pinching Jake.
Oh, yeah, and whistling, right?
And whistling.
Yeah.
Before that happened, I did it by myself when I was working, and it was like freaking me out. I had it on for like a minute, and it was like telling me, like, I can't remember what it was saying, but I was like, okay, I'm shutting that off.
I would not expect you to do that by yourself.
Well, I was doing it because I was making a stinger that had like
that
quick
sounds
tuning.
So you wanted that effect.
Yeah, I wanted to have that sound, and it was like, John, I'm in your room.
Pay attention. I'm sure you'll be experiencing that again because I'm sure during the sound design of this episode, you'll be playing with that. It's interesting because I had a similar experience, and I probably mentioned this on the show before, where I turned one of these apps on just to see. Because I think your first instinct is like, well, how is an iPhone going to be able to read this and that? But I was sitting under an archway that led from one room to another, and my name is Christian. And the first thing that popped up was Christian. And the second thing that popped up was archway. And I was sitting under an archway.
It was threshold.
Threshold. And I was sitting
weird.
like, it was just weird. I was like, okay.
Over that.
And I think point being, and I'm going to get back to the story real quick, but point being, even if the claims are overhyped and even if the technology isn't quite what it's stated to be or under-delivers in cases, I think like any tool, it can be manipulated to deliver results, like things that are unintentionally receivers for communication.
Right.
Whether it's like an old microwave,
radio,
VCR,
Super NES.
Possess
Mario. I don't know if you've heard of that.
But continuing on here.
There's one out the window. Weird. It says Jeff.
What?
No.
Yeah. JJJJEEEEFFFF.
What?
That's weird, man.
It knows our dark secret,
Is that
John.
the blue orb talking through the app? It's looking for Jeff.
That's weird.
That is kind of weird. JJJ. Why does it do the multiple letters?
I don't know.
Let me see what it looks like.
It's like a string of numbers.
Oh, weird.
So I don't think it's actually spelling anything, but it's like a series of numbers or letters. So you can see at the bottom kind of scrolling.
Oh, yeah.
But it was JEEE. JJJJEE.
Wow.
That is weird.
All right, let's get back to the story. We can do an experiment after this. I'm sure, John, the whole time I'm reading this, you're going to be not paying attention and looking at...
Okay, I'm done.
Let's do it after this. All right, here we go. Jumping back into his story. But this is sort of the impetus for what kicks off this evening for James. It was a random night. We were having a small get-together and playing with Ghost Radar Classic. A good time as usual. We were aware of House Ghost at the time, but decided to mess around anyway. In the past, House Ghost has gotten into a car with me and traveled to another town where he stayed and tossed furniture in a hotel for a week until I went back to see a sibling. He hitched a ride back home with me. Both terrifying drives. I can imagine. You get that sensation when you feel like someone's in your backseat? You know, probably just psychological. But imagine if just knowing that there is something, a presence that was in your hotel room and then something followed you. In your car, you're on a long drive, it's just there the whole time. Very uneasy. Who controls the radio?
Yeah, because when are they getting out, you know?
That's enough, House Ghost. I've had enough of you.
On this random evening, my brother's wife noticed a kid standing across the street staring at the house in the evening.
You guys see that? There's some kid over there. Oh, yeah, weird.
Odd, but whatever. We were inside having a good time. House Ghost was not pleased that we were playing around, so he decided to get involved. The Ghost Radar app started calling out what we were doing, and more specifically, what I was wearing and who I was. This is going to sound familiar, John. It called out, quote,
Brother.
And, quote,
America.
I am in a fraternity and was wearing a sweatshirt that has the words Captain America on it.
Oh, weird.
That was it for Ghost Radar that night. I made some noises down in the basement for the rest of the night. We locked the door and put some furniture in front of it.
Why don't you turn it off, though?
I think they did. I think that's the point.
Oh.
Is that it continued to make noises. I mean, that's my assertion. Maybe that's not true.
That's your assumption.
Yes.
You're asserting your assumption.
I am. Nothing more from him that night. But then it started raining. Cut to an hour or two later, the rain just stops. It was a heavy downpour and should not have stopped like that. Then there was a knock at the kitchen door. The door is behind the house, not visible from the streets. I almost flipped out, and none of us went to the door. We froze in place and waited. Another knock. Same as before. What felt like an eternity passed, and then rain. Just like before the knocks. Full, heavy rain. Decided not to sleep after that. Cut again to a couple more hours later. And it happens again. Rain stops. Knock at kitchen door. The exact same as before. This was too freaky, and again we did not move a muscle. Second knock. Rain comes back. Our theory is that house ghosts got pissed that we were taking things lightly and sent a black-eyed child to our house, as well as influencing the app to put us in our place. I will never go to that house again, and I actively avoid even driving past it. My own personal belief is that I'm easy to attach to, and that it was grooming me for either possession or some other nefarious purpose. I hope to never know. Thanks for listening, James.
Good story, James. Maybe delete the Ghost Radar app, though.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like susceptible.
If you're concerned about more attachments and possession, maybe avoid any sort of communication.
That's definitely creepy about the rain stopping and starting.
And the knocking.
It's very cinematic.
It has notes of demonic activity there with the weather
Reminds
manipulation.
me of Zozo. Very similar story with Zozo, but same thing. You're playing, well, he said they're taking it lightly, so you're kind of playing with this tool, not taking it seriously, and you are opening up an intention for something to come through. It's always a risky business.
Yeah, and Zozo's more of a controversial story of the legitimacy of those accounts, but
based on a real experience people have.
But what's fascinating is, and I'd love to do his story sometime, classic, relatively recent story in the paranormal library of accounts, famous accounts. I don't know if you guys, this story sound familiar to you? I can't recall his name at the moment, but it was a young man who had been released from prison and went back to his home where I think his grandfather had lived, and immediately started being tormented by his what he thought was maybe his grandfather who had molested him. Very dark story.
Ugh.
But during this account, it started raining in their home. And not only did it started raining inside the house, but then the water would reverse course and start rising in the living room. And there were police witnesses there that testified to this, all this occurring from this guy.
This was recent, you think?
At least the account was popularized a few years ago.
Okay. I thought it was a little older, the account, but yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so rain coming up, police seeing this in the house because they were called, right? So first it was the landlord that was called, because it's raining in the house. Is there a leak or something? The landlord comes and is freaked out. As the landlord's there, the water starts rising vertically.
Yeah, that's when
They call the police because who do you call? There's no real life Ghostbusters, unfortunately. Come on, Bill Murray, get your act together. But so they call the police. The police arrive and there's water rising from the floor, going up, going vertical. And then I think the story, and we'll do this account in depth sometime, I'm sure, but it ends with him going back to prison, I think, at some point. And when he's in jail, at this point, this demonic force that's been with him that he thinks was his grandfather has sort of infested part of his ego, part of his spirit or whatever. And this is all recorded with police reports. He's in his cell, and one of the other inmates freaked out by him because at this point, he's kind of being overcome by this thing. And it's either the jailer or one of the other inmates who says, oh yeah, this stuff really happened. I heard about what happened. Bullshit. Let's see some of it. And it starts raining in the sheriff's office. Pretty insane. But so this story it has notes of that sort of demonic possession stuff with water manipulation and weather control. Creepy.
Yeah, very
But
bizarre.
yeah, maybe delete that app.
Yeah, maybe get rid of the app.
Definitely an interesting story.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not you, James.
I hope you're handling it, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending that in.
Yeah, good story. I had another friend named Jeff.
I know. Maybe that's who the app is calling for.
Maybe. Yeah, he had hopefully we still get the story from sometime, but he got attacked by a shadow person.
I'd like to hear that story.
Yeah. Well, you went with him through that insane asylum, abandoned insane asylum.
Yeah. We talked about that because I just talked to him. I mean, this was a long time ago. We went to school with him a long time ago. And yeah, we talked about that trip. And he remembered it exactly the way I remembered it. It was really interesting.
That's such a great story. You told that before on our show,
Yeah,
right?
check out the show notes. We'll have a link to that episode.
Yeah.
Great retelling of that crazy experience in the asylum.
And then I went and recorded his band in Canada a couple years after. And that's where the shadow person attack happened.
At the venue?
No, it was at his mom's house.
Oh, in Canada?
In the basement.
Ugh.
Oh, that's creepy, dude.
And I was down there a lot by myself. It's where I was sleeping and where I did all the work.
You really?
Uh-huh.
I didn't know you stayed at his mom's house. Oh, when you were recording the band.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I was thinking when you were going to school there.
No.
Crazy stuff. That's a little, I guess, free room and board. But yeah, that's crazy, man. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, you should definitely get his story.
I will.
All right. Well, let's get back to the stories we have today.
All right. Getting back to the stories today. Let's go across the pond. The story comes to us from Chris from Lancashire.
English Chris.
English Chris. Thanks for this submission.
Yeah, this is really interesting. We've been meaning to get to this one for a while.
Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge because there's so much lore in this area, so much history. You know, that's the lovely thing about Europe in general is there's so much history there.
So much known history.
So much known history and so many things you can trace back, the recorded history. And his area specifically there's a lot of deep history there with a lot of events.
Yeah, I was looking into that a little bit because he provided a lot of information. This is another thing too, guys. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode, there are going to be surrounding details to these stories and some of these, like especially with Chris's story here, he provided a lot of information about where he comes from, his village, where the stuff happens. And we've included it in the notes about this weird, mysterious area. It'll be there. But we do know he comes from Easton on the Hill. That's the name of his village. Kind of the key point here is his village had served the local town called Stamford. And this area it has just crazy deep history of mystery and lore, from being a 9th century Danish Viking trading post, then a hotbed of Elizabethan spy mastery.
Awesome.
Followed up by being a hangout for legendary highwaymen like Dick Turpin himself, who apparently was a famous highwayman.
Dick Turpin?
Yeah. That's like a highwayman, John, if you don't know, or Chris, you don't know.
Oh, I know what a highwaymen are.
Okay.
There are people that would rob people along the highways and byways back in
Right.
old
Carriages
English
and
days.
stuff, kind of like very old school English version of